Hi there folks, welcome back to the IB and Andy Fishing channel. I hope you're doing really well. If you're a current subscriber to the channel, welcome back. Good to see you again. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please make sure you do that while you're watching this vlog, because that way you'll be kept in touch with all the news, all the reviews and all the fishing and stuff that IB and I are up to in the foreseeable future. Those of you who are already subscribed, you'll know this is Review Tuesday, and today's Review Tuesday is slightly different in that the thing I'm reviewing isn't an actual physical thing. It's held in there. So this is the first book that we've reviewed on Review Tuesday. I did do a very quick review of a book that's actually behind me somewhere, Matching the Hatch. Really important book, but this is the first Review Tuesday of a book, and honestly, if you're going to watch one book review or read up on one trout fishing book for the rest of your life, I think it really ought to be this. This is going to be the best money you ever spend on learning how to be a better trout angler. So the title of the book in question is Trout and Flies Getting Closer, and this is a book that's been co-authored by Peter Hayes and Don Stazicker. Now, Peter Hayes and Don Stazicker are both very, very well-known UK anglers, both fished all over the world. Peter Hayes particularly involved in the southern chalk stream scene. Very, very keen entomologist, done a huge amount of studying all over the place with regards to bugs and also fishing. Don Stazicker is a very, very highly regarded Derbyshire fishing guide, as well as being an author, writes for a lot of the magazines. Both massively educated chaps when it comes to the world of not only trout, but the bugs and technically how to catch these fish and what happens during the process of trying to catch these fish. Now, the first thing that makes this particular book slightly different to basically any other fishing book I've ever read is the format of it. Now, this isn't a paper book. There is no, as far as I'm aware, no hard copy of this book. And there's two reasons for that. First off, this is self-published by Don and Peter. This hasn't gone through a publisher. This is something they've done off their own back. The second reason that there isn't a hard copy of this, why there isn't a paper copy of this, is because actually the format of this book is slightly different in that you would download it either to Kindle or you would download it to your laptop or desktop via the Kindle reader for desktop, which is the way that I would recommend doing it of the two. And in the book, not only are there obviously all the words and pages you'd expect in a book, there's a huge amount of high quality images, but most importantly, what makes this totally different are there a large number of super high resolution, super slow motion film clips, and that's really, really important. The book itself is split into quite well defined sections. We've got Trout and Flies, our impact on the trout, what to do about what happens, hunting, spotting and diagnosing, and niche foods and selectivity. Now, you'll probably already gather from the titles of the different sections of this book that this is quite a technical book. It's quite a broad spectrum of topics, but actually the guys really go into depth on this, and throughout the 350 pages of the book there is a brilliant amount of information here. It's so information rich. It's the kind of book that you're going to want to break down into stages, and actually by using the video clips and by using these sections you'll be able to do exactly that. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail as to the actual content of the book. I really want you guys to buy a copy of this yourselves and go through it yourselves. I don't want to completely blow what's in the book, but what I do want to give you guys a quick glimpse of is kind of how it flows, the type of videos, the type of images that you can expect from it, and exactly what you guys are going to get back from the book. And I'm probably going to do that actually by going through what I got from the book with some very, very specific examples. And as I say, hopefully once you guys have bought your own copy, you'll be able to build on that. Now, I think what Don and Peter did here is absolutely expertly, but very gently disprove some of the kind of conventional norms. And that's where having that super slow motion and very high resolution video footage is vital. Pretty much all the books that we have available to us that talk about the technicalities of the way trout feed, trout's eyesight and stuff like that are based on, you know, someone's opinion of what they've seen, rather than being something that they can watch back again and again and again. It's something that someone has watched happen maybe for a couple of instances and thought, well, that must be how that works then, because I've seen that happen a few times. And actually what Don and Peter have done through here is disprove a couple of those, or at the very least give enough information to suggest that perhaps things are slightly different from what we first expected. And I think the best example I could give with that to start with is kind of what trout see, what we call the window. And I think anyone who's read any particularly technical trout fishing books would have seen the diagram, and there'd have been, I'll tell you what, I'll take the grayling here, there'd have been a fish and there'd have been a cone that sticks up from here. And, you know, whatever's in that cone going upwards we would take as being the window. Now what Don and Peter did is step back and say, well, hang on a minute, that window relies on refraction. what the fish can see out of the water depends on how the meniscus of the water bends the light. We all know about how the water refracts light. I think that's something that most people are familiar with. And that cone that we'd seen before totally depends on the surface of the water being dead flat. We see it in all of the images. The water is dead flat. Now we know, particularly as river anglers, but as anglers in general, that's not true. That's not how it works. And that's what Peter and Don really focus on early in the book.
The edge of the trout's window is rarely stationary. Any ripples cause it to flicker and move, and massively distort anything within the window. Note how the trees, the clouds, the rod and the outline of the angler are in constant motion. Also note that there is absolutely no clear edge to the window. It is constantly moving.
How cool is that? And that is just one example of exactly what the guys are looking at early on in the book. It's, what are these fish actually seeing on the water, outside of the water? How important is it that they can see further under the water than above it? And all of a sudden you start scratching your head and think, well, actually, is that why my emerger patterns work more effectively? Is it just because they can see further under the water? Is that how we're able to creep onto these fish a little bit closer than we think? Is that how sometimes we spook to fish from much further away than we think? What Don and Peter have done is shown that actually in real world situations, that refraction and the way fish see particularly out of the water, but also stuff that's stuck in the surface of the water, is a little bit different to what we all thought. On the subject of being wrong, there was another part of the book that totally blew apart something that I thought I knew was being correct. Quite happy to admit this one. So I've been asked a number of times, particularly during the mayfly season, clients will be on the water and they'll see the shucks of the mayfly nymphs. And a lot of people have said to me, Andy, do they ever eat that? Do they ever eat the shuck? And I've always said, no, absolutely not. There'd be no calorific content in a shuck. They don't eat them. And then I watched this.
When mayflies emerge, they leave behind a shuck. This shuck's quite substantial and has significant calorific value. It's actually targeted by fish selectively, as in the case of this wild brown trout. This fish fed for over 10 minutes purely on shucks. It never took a dun, it never took any other form of insect. When we look at this one, it's really obvious that below the surface these are very apparent to fish and targeted from a long distance.
Well, there we go. That's me conclusively proven wrong. And it's one of those things that if I'd have read in a book and just read someone, right, I've seen trout eating mayfly shucks, I don't think I'd have believed it. But one of the great things about this format is that you can't question it. Another thing that comes up quite often during the course of the book is the idea of casualty duns. Now, we've all heard of the idea of a crippled fly, a fly that failed during emergence. But actually, Don and Peter looked at this a little bit more closely, and what they noticed through the use of the really high-tech cameras, the slow motion stuff, the real close-up stuff, was that actually a lot of what we thought might be cripples are duns that did hatch. They got out of the shuck, but within the first few flaps of their wings, they landed with a wing flat on the water that got stuck, or just one of the tails maybe got stuck in the shuck as they emerged. And they failed that way, so actually they became casualty duns rather than a kind of a crippled emerger, the traditional crippled emerger, which when you watch this video will make you think a few different things.
A casualty dun was taken there. Quite often these fish will target the flies that are vulnerable. They're not necessarily interested in taking the perfect duns that are likely to fly away at the last moment. So flies with one wing in the surface, those still attached to the shuck. There's a typical one, but the trout actually missed it. It made no mistake with that one, however. These casualty duns are very regularly taken.
So I don't know about you guys, but I watched that and my immediate thought was, wow, am I throwing patterns that are too pretty? Should we be tying flies that lie with a wing on the surface? Do we need to tie flies with tails at all? Fantastic work by Peter and Don on that one to capture something like that. A fish feeding so selectively on those specific casualty duns and ignoring the proper upright, really good looking ones is absolutely fascinating to me. One of the other benefits of the super high speed footage is that it can catch things that you can go back and notice that you may not have seen before. Little clips like this. Now I want you to play the game as Don's talking about it here.
An overcast September day, cool and drizzling slightly. I love it. Just the circumstances where you would expect small upwing flies to emerge. the low light levels reducing predation. In this backwater, just off the side of the main current, there's a recirculation, and facing upstream into that flow, in other words downstream relative to the river, are a number of fish. The challenge is, how many? There are actually 7 rising fish in this clip. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 are simultaneous. 6 and 7. Don't feel too bad, it's extremely hard to spot the rising fish amongst these raindrops and all the surface debris blown down by the wind and the foam that's trapped in this recirculation.
Now, I'll be honest, the first time I watched that clip, I think I saw 3 rises. It was the 3 on the right-hand side that I saw. I didn't see any of those in the middle. They are very, very subtle rises. And the kind of thing that, you know, maybe if you were there, you might notice it a bit more, you might catch the light. But it goes to show just how delicately these fish can feed. And those fish were feeding on a mixture of duns and what the guys here call casualty duns. You know, they weren't little spinner sips and stuff like that. They were taking insects off the surface. They were just doing it so delicately that to the naked eye, you might not have noticed that. Again, fantastic footage and totally invaluable to those of us who are trying to think a little bit more further, a little bit more technically about the way we catch fish on dry flies. So what I don't want to do is show too many more of the videos. There are around about 30 of them in the book and they are absolutely invaluable. I don't want to show too many of them. I don't want to blow the book. I really want you guys to go out and buy it. It's such an interesting book to read. It's very, very information rich. There is so much here. It's not the kind of book that you're going to sit down and kind of flick through and, you know, cover all 350 pages in a day. I broke it down into really short sections, and personally I used those videos to kind of base the way I read it. There is so much information here from 2 of the UK's most experienced fly anglers, certainly 2 of the UK's most analytical fly anglers, that this could take weeks or months to fully digest. Every time I pick this back up, or every time I look at it on the computer again, I'll read through one of the chapters and I'll get something else from it. And I think that's one of the absolute clear signs of a really, really good book. The format's unusual, but I think actually for what Don and Pete are trying to achieve here, I think it's crucial. I think being able to back it up, not only with the super high resolution images, which are all fantastic, but being able to show people in super slow motion these videos is absolutely crucial, not only to relaying the information across to the reader or the viewer, but also to disproving some of the more kind of conventional wisdoms that we'd all taken for granted that actually, it turns out, may not have been correct. So while I accept that the format is slightly unusual compared to a normal book or even a normal ebook, it is crucial to the function of this book that when you download it, that you use the videos. That's why I personally think that you're better off downloading the Amazon Kindle Reader for your laptop and then viewing it on there. Now you have to remember when you're downloading and reading this book that this is a self-published title by Peter and Don. Please, when you download this, don't expect a very chintzy, very glamorous kind of Sotheby's Guide to Fly Fishing or something like that, because it isn't. What this is a huge amount of fantastic relevant information put down in such a way by Peter and Don that they're trying to break this down and make it as easy to digest as possible. But please don't expect your kind of traditional guide to fly fishing instructional thing, because it isn't that. So short and sweet, that is my review, or probably rather my preview of Don and Peter's book, Trout and Flies, Getting Closer. I think that's a really, really cool title, by the way, just the implication of getting closer. Because to be honest, by the time you've read this book, you genuinely do feel like you've got a little bit closer to the truth of how flies hatch and fish feed on them. I definitely feel like I'm a better angler for having read all this information, and I know that you guys will too. It is embarrassingly cheap. Honestly, having read this book, I feel guilty that I've paid £9.99 for it. It is ludicrously cheap. If you only spend £10 on any piece of fly fishing information ever again, you've got to spend it on this book, because I really do hold it in that high regard. This is up there with any of the fly fishing books that have been created on the subject of flies, fish and food. £9.99 on Amazon. It is ludicrously cheap. It's great information. Everyone really needs to go out and buy a copy of this. I'll leave a link in the description box below. Please go out. £10 very, very well spent, particularly during a lockdown. What else are we going to do? Read this book. You will be a better angler. All I need to say now is thank you very much for watching this Review Tuesday or Preview Tuesday, whatever we want to call it. Really appreciate it. As I say, there'll be a link in the description box below for you guys to go out and buy a copy of the book. I really do suggest that you download it, particularly download it so you can read it on a desktop computer or a laptop. It just makes those images, it makes those videos so much better on the bigger screen. And all that remains for me to say is thank you very much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed it, please press like. If you know a friend who would like the review or like the book, please make sure you share this video with them to make sure they get a copy themselves. And IB and I will see you guys again very, very soon for some more fishing and stuff. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.